Picture this: an old, sprawling empire, rich with history, yet stumbling under the weight of its own centuries-long accumulation of power. That was the Ottoman Empire in the early 1900s, familiarly nicknamed the sick man of Europe. And it wasn't a kind nickname. It spoke volumes about how precarious their position had become.
It's never a great sign when your empire gets its own unflattering nickname. So, what's happening here? Why was the Ottomans' health in such a sorry state?
Well, for starters, their economy was, let's say, limping along. European powers had meddled for decades, granting themselves legal immunities through those infamous capitulations, draining the empire's finances and eroding sovereignty. Add in a series of military defeats, and you've got an empire with severely bruised confidence.
And bruises like that don't heal easily, especially with Europe circling like vultures. Russia, Austria, Hungary, Britain, they were all eyeing different pieces of Ottoman land, weren't they?
Exactly. This competition was the heart of what they called the Eastern Question, essentially how to divide the empire's slowly crumbling territories without starting a war between themselves. Russia wanted control of the Turkish Straits for naval access. Austria-Hungary, they feared Slavic nationalism and aspired to expand southward. Britain? Oh, classic Britain, keeping Russia out of the Mediterranean. Talk about a tangled mess.
A powder keg, really, and the Balkans were right in the centre of it.
Absolutely. Now, the Ottoman leadership wasn't blind to this decline. Throughout the 19th century and into the early 20th, there were efforts to reverse the decay. These were the Tanzimat reforms, attempts at modernizing the military, administration, and economy while granting equal rights to non-Muslim subjects.
Interesting. So reforms were meant to unify the diverse population, something like fostering an Ottoman identity.
That's right, but it was a tough sell. By then, nationalist movements inspired by ideas from, say, the French Revolution were gaining traction. Greeks, Serbs, Bulgarians, all dreaming of their own independent nations. Ottomanism, it became more of an ideal than a reality.
Then comes the Young Turks.
Yes, those ambitious reformists. In 1908, they rose to power, initially riding a wave of hope for modernization and equality. However, their agenda also sparked even more nationalism, especially Turkish nationalism, which often clashed with the aspirations of other ethnic groups. Ironically, their drive to unify the empire through reforms only deepened divisions.
So it was like trying to fix a cracked foundation, but every patch brings new issues.
Exactly. The Young Turks were a double-edged sword, voices of reform, but also a catalyst for much of the unrest. And their rise left the Ottoman government weaker, fragmented, and often outmaneuvered by European interests. Building on the nationalist fervor we touched on, let's turn our focus to the Balkans, a rugged mountainous region where the echoes of independence movements grew louder by the year. By the late 19th century, this patchwork of cultures and religions under Ottoman rule was beginning to unravel, as nationalist dreams ignited fires that no amount of Ottoman authority could extinguish.
And these weren't just small fires, we're talking full-scale uprisings, right?
Exactly. Inspired by the French Revolution and the independence of Italy and Germany, Serbs, Greeks, Bulgarians, and others envisioned their own nations, free from Ottoman control. By the 1800s, their uprisings, like Greece's War of Independence, were chipping away at Rumelia, the Ottoman European heartlands.
And the Ottomans could barely keep up, could they?
Barely. Add to this the rivalry of European powers eager to play puppet master with these nascent nations. Russia backed Orthodox Slavs, Austria-Hungary bristled at Serbian nationalism, and Britain, as usual, kept a wary eye on its geopolitical chessboard. The Balkans, this beautiful jagged landscape, was becoming Europe's powder keg.
Which brings us to the Balkan Wars. What went wrong for the Ottomans there?
Oh, where to begin? In 1912, Sensing Ottoman weakness after the Italo-Turkish War, Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece and Montenegro set aside their rivalries to form the Balkan League. Their goal? Drive the Ottomans out of Europe once and for all. What followed was nothing short of staggering.
The First Balkan War, then?
Yes. The Balkan League armies struck with incredible ferocity, showcasing unified coordination, which smashed the Ottoman forces in places like Kumanovo, capturing Macedonian lands, and Thessaloniki, the jewel of Rumelia, fell to the Greeks.
And wasn't there this moment when the Ottomans were pushed within shouting distance of Istanbul?
Exactly. The Ottomans managed to set up a final defensive line near Satalka, barely holding on to their capital. The shock of losing nearly all European territory, not just Macedonia and Albania, but also pieces of their historical identity, was overwhelming. Then came the Second Balkan War.
Which was a fight over the spoils of the first?
Precisely. Bulgaria, feeling short-changed from the division of conquered land, turned on its allies. This backfired spectacularly. Serbia, Greece, Romania, and even the Ottomans teamed up against Bulgaria. The Treaty of Bucharest in 1913 finalized the borders, leaving the Ottomans with little more than eastern Thrace in Europe. Yet, amidst all this chaos, there's a small yet bittersweet story worth mentioning.
Go on, I'm intrigued.
It involves a young officer named Mustafa Kemal. In the thick of the confusion during these wars, he carried a family heirloom, a humble, hand-woven belt passed down from generations in his family. For him, it wasn't just a keepsake. It symbolized resilience, the strength to endure the upheaval of empire and forge something new from its ruins. That heirloom traveled with him through war and into the founding of modern Turkey.
It's remarkable how personal connections to history play out like that.
They carry the weight of collective memory, don't they? The Balkans of 1913 weren't just lands lost. They were centuries of history unraveling, paving the way for the next chapter in Ottoman and global history. With the scars of the Balkan Wars still fresh, the Ottoman Empire found itself navigating uncharted waters by 1914. Military defeats and territorial losses weighed heavily, but they also set the stage for alliances that promised a glimmer of hope. Enter Germany, a would-be savior dangling military expertise and strategic promises. Let's explore how the empire, battered but still standing, made its fateful choices as World War I loomed.
Germany, of course, saw immense strategic value in involving the Ottomans. But why did the Ottomans take the bait? What was in it for them?
Several reasons, really. First, Enver Pasha, the empire's charismatic but reckless minister of war, was enthralled by Germany's military prowess. He believed that aligning with the Central Powers, the Germans and Austro-Hungarians, would strengthen the empire and recover lost territories, especially from Russia. Plus, Germany promised to abolish those humiliating capitulations.
Ah, so it wasn't just ideology, it was a calculated gamble.
Exactly, but it was a high-stakes gamble. In late 1914, under German influence, the Ottomans sparked conflict by launching a surprise attack on Russian ports in the Black Sea. That act was the tipping point. Russia, Britain and France all declared war on the Ottomans.
And from that moment on, they were fighting on countless fronts, weren't they?
Oh yes, and the strain was enormous. From the Caucasus Mountains in the north to the deserts of Mesopotamia and the Sinai, not to mention the Dardanelles. Let's not forget Gallipoli, the campaign that shaped not just the war, but an entire nation.
Gallipoli, that's where Mustafa Kemal, the future Ataturk, made his mark, right?
Indeed. He became a national hero there. His leadership during the Allied landings at Anzac Cove was nothing short of extraordinary. Against all odds, he managed to rally the Ottoman troops, halt the invasion, and secure one of the empire's few victories in the war. It was at Gallipoli that he famously told his men, "I do not order you to attack, I order you to die."
A statement that resonated far beyond the trenches.
Absolutely. But while the victory at Gallipoli energized the Ottoman public, elsewhere the empire was unraveling. The home front suffered immensely. Famine swept through regions like Syria and Lebanon. Disease was rampant, and ethnic tensions boiled over into horrific atrocities, including the Armenian Genocide. The weight of war bled the empire dry.
It's staggering to think about a once great empire effectively cannibalizing itself in its final years.
And its end came swiftly. By 1918, the Ottoman military was defeated across multiple fronts. The collapse of Bulgaria severed the empire from the Central Powers, leaving it utterly isolated. The Armistice of Mudros, signed in October of that year, marked the effective end of its sovereignty. The terms were brutal: a demilitarized army, Allied control of key territories, and occupation of Istanbul itself.
And yet from these ashes came the Republic of Türkiye.
Yes, it's a remarkable story. Out of military defeat and societal collapse rose a movement fueled by resilience and vision, a push to modernize, to create a nation-state rooted in Turkish identity. It wasn't easy, and the scars of World War I shaped Turkey's story as much as its victories did.
History, I think, has this strange way of turning endings into beginnings.
Beautifully put. And on that note, we'll wrap up today's exploration of this fascinating, tumultuous era. Thank you for joining us in retracing the steps of a storied empire's fall and the resilience that turned decline into a new chapter. Until next time.